Hello, listeners. All week I've been looking forward to this moment when I get to do my second broadcast. My name is Bree and I am the gardener. You are listening to The Garden, a 1-hour show on Monday nights, in which I am going to attempt to curate a thoughtful space of beauty and the pursuit of truth. Not a gardening show. I feel like I have to say that. Not a gardening show. I have been a little trepidatious all week, though, because if you were listening last week, you might remember that I had some trouble with the audio. Cringe. Even though the K-Tech staff gave me 30 minutes of training time. Like many moms of preschoolers, you might know that mommy brain is a real thing. And I mean, it's hard for me to even remember to put on my left sock after I've put on my right. I'm quite serious. And so I brought my sweet husband in tonight to help me out with the sound because he knows a little more about it than I do. Thilo, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here tonight as well with you, Bree, for the first time on FM radio, 89.5 K-Tech. It's fantastic.
It never gets old saying that. It's like
Let's say it one more
we're
time.
In a movie. 89.5 K-Tech in Klamath Falls. That's what you're listening to.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Welcome to the
I
garden.
do feel like I'm in a TV show. It's true. Anyway, I was also a little trepidatious because I discovered last week, even though I am a whole 1/4 Italian and I love the sound of my own voice, it was harder than I thought to fill up a whole hour of airtime with my own thoughts and ideas. So Thilo's going to make that a little easier by sharing half the time with me tonight, if I let him.
Of course.
If I can stop
You'll
talking.
have to. You might get in trouble after the fact.
Right.
If you don't.
Also, we get a whole hour of just being alone together, too.
That's
talking.
super nice. It's almost like a date.
It's like a date.
I really enjoy it.
Yes, it's lovely. So I mentioned last week that my husband Thilo is a German. His name is not Thilo like T to the L-O, a rapper. He is not a hip-hop artist. His name is Thilo, T-H-I-L-O, a traditional German name. He was born and raised in Berlin. Thilo, you want to tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, as my wife was saying, I was born in Berlin in 1985. That is the year when the wall in Berlin was still up. That means I was born in the East, in the former communist East Berlin. Meaning, growing up with that kind of philosophy, it's interesting for sure. My grandma and my mom, very much communistic in their worldview. However, the world is open now, right? The wall came down in 1989, and here we go. A little history lesson for all of us, right? Came down in 1989, and then...
What's he talking about?
What's the wall? Exactly.
That's ancient history for modern people.
It's the famous Berlin Wall, right? So where the West basically came to the East, and the East was completely obliterated. So now here we are. I grew up in a very, fairly poor upbringing, but I can still say I had everything that we needed. We had food in the fridge. I was able to pursue my hobbies, which was basketball from the 5th grade on. And I was always dreaming of the United States and playing in the NBA. And guess what? I'm only 5.9 feet tall. So I never would have made it. Muggsy Bogues, right? The good old 90s.
You can dream.
Oh my goodness. So that's where I was headed in my mind, right? I wanted to get there. However, at the age of 16 to 17, I started to sing in a gospel choir. Back in Berlin, if you would know it, right? If you could believe it, a gospel choir singing English songs from the States, black gospels, and we're all white kids, which was fantastic. It was full of soul. We had a wonderful, wonderful teacher, wonderful voice, by the way. You should pull that out every once in a while.
Should I pursue my gospel?
Yes, for sure. So at the age of 17, then I started playing some guitar as well. And yeah, I just basically became a full-hearted or full-blown musician from that age on, and that led me to becoming the lead singer of a band called Vincent, not written with a Z, but with the but with a Z instead. So not the Vincent. And we always thought these movie characters that are called Vincent in any movie were the craziest and most outrageous people. So we called our band Vincent because we thought we were these people. Crazy and outrageous in our music.
So if there's a movie with a character named Vincent, he's going to be the crazy one.
He's going to be the crazy one.
Okay.
Most of the times, yes.
Mark my words. Next time you watch a movie, when you see Vincent,
Think about it.
you're going to know right away.
That's correct. That's correct. So after a while, we toured and played and recorded a little EP for 2.5 to 3 years. We were a band, and then we had a little fallout. I had a fallout with one of the band members.
As you do.
As you do after a while. It's almost like breaking up with a girlfriend. It's hard.
It's worse.
But it happens, and you feel like you're almost married to this band because you meet so often. We practice like 3 times a week, and then on the weekends we would travel hours and hours to play this show where we didn't make any money, and maybe some musicians can relate to that, just to be seen, hopefully to sell some, like these lapel buttons or pins with your name on it and a CD.
Totally early 2000s.
Yes, and maybe hopefully you get back the money that you paid just to get there.
Right.
So lodging, food, and that. But man, we were living the dream, but we had a big falling out. So maybe at another time we can talk about that, Brie.
Yeah, I'm actually going to have, I hope, if K-Tech doesn't kick me off the airwaves, I'd love to have my husband come back on and actually do a show where we feature some of his music.
That's right. That's right. So a couple of years down the road, in that time still when I was in the band, I actually met my wife, Brie, and her mother-in-law, Kim. And they were in Berlin, and they were busy on the street, bringing whatever they believed in to Berlin, and they were living it, their dream and their calling, and they came to Berlin. And I met them, and I was excited to meet them. They asked me to come on out with them and play some songs on the street. So that's what I did. Brought my guitar, started singing those songs with them.
I almost want to ask you to just sing a couple notes for us of something.
Of something.
You're not warmed up.
It would be fantastic if we could do that right now on the spot. Let me see what we have on the air right now. I think we got some, what are we? Jonathan Morgenstern, Shlomo Goldfinger. How do you like that?
That was lovely. It really was.
I usually don't sing to jazz music.
I don't think you've ever heard this song before.
No,
either.
that's right.
Nice.
But it's pretty. It's really pretty. And our friend Jonathan in Berlin will appreciate that we're playing his music in the States right now. Super cool. However, here we go. So after the falling out, met Brie and Kim, my mother-in-law Kim, and hey, with that, and as well to our kids at home who might be listening right now, and they should go to bed right now. Good night. However, I recorded my very first solo album in 2016, which is exciting, right? For any musician, that was like like one big milestone in my life. So that's what I did.
And we did that in Belarus.
Of all places, in the last, if you may even say it, the last dictatorship in Europe. No one wants to say that, but it's just a fact, right? However...
And the door was, at that time, not open for tourists to go in. It's now open. I don't know if that law still exists, but now you can fly into Minsk.
That's correct.
And you can go into Belarus on a tourist visa. But at that time, you could not go in. It was a closed country.
That's right.
And it's a long story how we got there, but it was pretty amazing.
And we met some people there. So for whatever reason, met some people there, and they heard me play a song for them on a Sunday morning, and then they asked me, hey, do you want to come back and record an album? We have a professional studio here. So I said, yep, let's pick a date. And the year following, following year, we came back. And that kind of like led into our story of how we started traveling. Maybe not, like we were already traveling a little bit, but man.
So, but first, before we launch into, so our topic tonight is actually going to be travel. Last week we talked about the topic of loss and despair. What a great topic. And this week we're going to talk about something a little more jovial, maybe, traveling. But I wanted to ask Thilo first. So Thilo, this is what all the Germans would ask me. So now you've lived in the United States for 2 whole years. We lived in North Carolina before moving here to Klamath Falls. And I wanted to ask you, do you like living here? Do you miss Germany? Do you like it here in the United States?
I've just recently seen that movie, Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny, and yes, the first half an hour movie was German, which is incredible, and you sounded just like them. Very good. Very good impersonation of a German person.
I did live there for 15 years.
However, I have to answer that question with yes and yes.
Good.
So that's yes, I miss it, and yes, I love it here. So both a yes, and of course, you always miss something that you can't have where you're at. So I love living in the U.S. and specifically in the Pacific Northwest. So Oregon, man, It's a dream. It's beautiful. I love the nature. I love the coast.
It is a dream.
I love being so close to the Californian lava beds. We have lava beds north of us near Bend, and the mountains are fantastic. Winter is great. Summer's hot. Sunshine in Klamath Falls, they say 300 days of sunshine. So Klamath Falls has not disappointed me yet with that. It's beautiful. So lovely. For that reason, I'm very happy where we're located right now and that we're here. So people are really nice here as well, right? It's easy to get to talking to strangers. And it's just a cultural difference too. In Germany, if you would walk up to a stranger in the store and start talking to them about your day and just saying, hey, what's up? How are you doing? And they would actually respond or whatever. They would think you want something from them, like money, or you're like, you're up to no good.
They would think you were crazy.
A little crazy. Yeah. And maybe that's true for me anyways.
Can I just say something real quick on that topic?
Sure.
I take my 3 children grocery shopping with me, and people in the store love to talk to me about my 3 kids. And a few weeks ago, now I have 3 kids. I have twins and a toddler. So I only had 2 pregnancies. But a few weeks ago, an older gentleman came up to me in the store and asked me, do they call you Fertile Myrtle?
Oh my goodness.
Now, something like that would never, ever happen in Berlin. It's such a culture shock.
Yeah.
Do they call you Fertile Myrtle? Because you got 3 whole kids.
Can you believe it? Yes, 3 kids in our culture nowadays.
Okay, well, is there anything about Germany that you do miss and that you're surprised that you miss it?
I'm not surprised about that. I miss my family, obviously.
Sure.
So I have 2 younger sisters, and my mom lives there too with her husband, and I have my aunt there too, and my cousins. So all of my family, really close family, lives right there. So that's something that I miss. But man, our technology nowadays makes it easy, right, to stay in touch. Do we stay in touch every single week? No, we don't. But when we talk for like an hour or so, and we can see each other, and then we can show the kids and everything. So that's kind of what I miss, like that personal interaction. And I guess with COVID, we had that already a little bit, the distance between the family, because we weren't allowed to see each other. So before we moved to the States, we experienced that distance already, even though we lived in the same city. But now that we're here, that real distance is really tangible. So I do miss them, but on the other hand, I miss foods as well.
Right.
Very specific foods that are typically German or even from Berlin, Germany, that you just can't get here.
For example,
you have 2 of those. They would be one of those things that's easy to get and super cheap. It's like a sandwich. It's called a doner kebab. And you've probably heard this before. It's just like a little sandwich. Wow, we have really dramatic music in the background right now. I'm enjoying it.
That's John Barry from Out of Africa, Flying Over Africa. It's
haunting.
Like last week, one of my favorite songs.
I love listening to that music. That's great. So doner kebab with that. It's like a sandwich. You have like lamb meat in it, salad, and some sauces, and it's really easy to eat. Like it's like a big sandwich, almost like a burger, but a sandwich. I don't want to say sandwich burger, but yeah.
It's like a gyro.
It's like a gyro.
It's the Turkish version of a Greek gyro.
That's right. And then the other thing would be broiled chicken that you can get very easily there. It's not hard to get by. It costs like $5, and then
it's a street food.
It's a street food, right? You can get anywhere. So that's the kind of things that I miss. But luckily enough, we have a German deli / bakery / whatever little store in Portland. It's only 5 hours away, where I can get all kinds of German things that I would not be able to get anywhere else but in that store.
Shout out Edelweiss.
Edelweiss.
If you're ever in Portland and you want some good German food, Edelweiss.
Go ahead, ask them for like a nice wiener or whatever. And in Portland as well, there's like a street vendor, and they have a doner kebab as well.
Kebab.
So I would have to drive 5 hours just to get that doner.
And you would do it.
And I would do it.
Maybe
and
not.
We did do it. So that's kind of what I miss.
Yeah. Cool.
Along the side. Maybe a little bit the creativity and the street art that just is everywhere.
That's kind of a big city thing. If you lived in a bigger city, you would see a little bit more of that, I think. And I don't think that's a Europe-America thing.
I did get that a little bit in Portland, a little bit in Bend.
But Portland
Salem.
Is totally Berlin these days,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't have to travel far to go to Berlin. Just go to Portland. Anyway, so the topic of our show tonight, traveling. And I found a quote that I kind of wanted to start with. It's by Michael Bassey Johnson, or is it Bassey? Bassey or Bassey, who wrote The Book of Maxims, Poems, and Anecdotes. And he said, "A good traveler is one who knows how to travel with the mind." And I wanted to start with that because, don't really want to sound like a traveling snob that you think, oh, you actually have to travel around the world. You don't. I mean, I 100% agree with Michael Bassey Johnson. You don't have to travel to experience the joy of other places, those snow caps and sun-drenched worlds that are somewhere out there. I read this book once called The Virago Book of Women Travelers by Mary Morris, and it is a collection of true stories about amazing women throughout history who traveled. And they didn't travel like we travel, getting on an airplane. They really seriously traveled by ship or on horseback, and not in this world where everybody speaks English and everything's already mapped out. This was like true foreign travel into darkness and the thrill of the unknown. And I actually feel as though I experienced some of those journeys with some of those women. And I guess in a way I have, because they shared their experience with me through their amazing writings. I have read quite a bit about an incredible lady named Amy Carmichael, who was a missionary in colonial India and Japan. And with her, I have experienced the cool mountains of the heights of India and the Indian temples. I've also traveled deepest Africa with David Livingstone. I suffered with him through river fever. I helped him create a trade route through the continent and avoid Portuguese slave traders. So through some of those writings and sharings of more amazing travelers than myself, my horizon has been expanded. So I don't expect that Thilo and I can quite hit the mark of expanding a horizon like that, but I do hope that through our shared experiences tonight, we can tease a little bit of fascination out for you. So right now, yes, we are middle-aged parents who are living in Klamath Falls, which is an adventure. We have an adventure all the time, don't we? We feel like we're in the Wild West. But before this, we were people who bought a very small RV, lived in it with my mother, Thilo's mother-in-law, for 2 years and traveled around Europe. I think we visited 18 countries with the RV. That's what I counted.
Could be.
So, Thilo, describe the little RV that you moved into with your mother-in-law for our listeners.
So think 1991, the model, Fiat Ducato. It has an alcove with a queen bed on top above the driver cabin. Then it has a tiny bed in the back right next to the bathroom/shower cabin. You can barely stand up in it or sit down in it, but that's what it is.
Does this RV have a pull-out on the side to make it bigger?
Those RVs in Europe, you can't even imagine. It's like you're back in the 70s maybe with one of those RVs.
The answer is no.
No.
No pull-out.
No pull-outs, no on the sides or whatever, the top. It doesn't get bigger. And yes, it's small.
We did put curtains in it.
And did we pay 10,000 euros for it? Oh my god, yes we did.
Something like that, and it was expensive.
It was expensive
It was
for
expensive.
such an old
Yeah.
RV. But the middle section has a kitchen. The seating area has seats 4 around a table, and that one turns into a bed, and all separate. Everything's separated by curtains only. So we didn't have like another wall, another door to shut. We hung up curtains that you buy at IKEA or any other store that has curtains, and we hung those up, and that was our, separators. And at one point, we had friends visit us, and we'll come to that later, in Denmark. But at that time, we slept 5 people in that tiny RV.
I had forgotten that until you mentioned it. And I can't believe we did that.
That's great.
2 on top, 2 on a table, and 1 on another table. The smallest thing. Anyway, okay, so Thilo, we went to 18-ish countries.
That's right.
What are some of your favorite memories, or what was your favorite country and why? Tell us a little bit about that.
So it's really hard to put that into just like, here's my favorite country, because Europe is so diverse and has all these different historical cities. England is one of those countries where you would just, if you're a little bit of a history buff, or you like some of the movies or shows that you've seen from, the past, England is one of those countries that has just the romance and the beauty and the history. We've been to a tiny chapel in Scotland. Just outside the chapel was a statue of what's his name? William Wallace from Braveheart. The actual William Wallace statue and that chapel standing right next to him was 1,000 years old.
I don't remember that. I don't deny it.
And we went into it, and it had these old paintings on the wall as well. Like I said, 1,000 years old, and they have kept it so well. Just to look at that. That was up in Scotland. So that was one of my places in the world on the top of my bucket list. Scotland, so Glasgow, Edinburgh. I loved going to Gothenburg, Sweden. Sweden is pretty in itself. We love Denmark. Like I said, we come to that and we'll talk more about that. But Sweden, there was just one area where we parked just by the shores and the beaches. And in England, we have these cities like Stratford-upon-Avon, which is the birthplace of Shakespeare. And those buildings are incredible. Like, there are these old wooden buildings that just look fantastic.
Crooked doors,
half sunken in buildings. It's incredible to see. You think you're like in a weird fantasy world, but it's all right there, and it's down Main Street, and they're downtown, and it's still alive and kicking, and people are still using those buildings too. Yes. So one of my highlights, and probably Bree's yours too, was Dunnet Head, the top north tip of England. That's Scotland, right at the top. And we could see, finally, in real life, puffins. And I know Bree probably didn't talk about it yet, but that we're secret bird watchers-ish.
I was saving that for when our ratings were really high.
There you go. And suddenly they went up. Just like that.
Because we're bird watching.
That's right.
Bird watching is the second most popular hobby in the United States before you judge us.
That's right. And the first one, I hear it's gardening. So we're right in there.
We're the garden and we're bird watchers.
That's right.
We're amazing.
Are we good at it? I don't think so, but we're right there.
But we did see the puffins in Dunnet Head, Scotland, and they were so cute.
Incredible.
Oh.
Incredible. They look a certain way and they sound a totally different way that you don't expect that they sound when they give their little beak, whatever.
Could you please do a puffin impersonation?
I can't. We would have to look it up for another time. Seriously. Or you just look it up, puffin, Puffin. That's how you spell that. And if you have seen them before and heard them before, you know exactly what we're talking about. Paris was great. We didn't get to see Paris, but I got to see Disneyland. So that was fun. The first time in my life and the last time in my life that I ever saw anything Disneyland-ish stuff.
We went on Christmas Day. It was really fun.
It was magical. And then the drive from Spain to Portugal, you know, it was just incredible. They were like two different worlds, just going from Spain, the dry and the hot, into the lush and green and just vivid green colors of plants and bushes and trees over the bridge. And suddenly we were in a different nation, different country. It felt really like that.
Yeah,
yes.
It was a weird and cool.
Yes.
Okay, so my favorite is Denmark. It's a hard question to answer. The whole world is so amazing, right?
It is.
But as far as our European travels, I loved Denmark so much. We both have an enduring love affair with England. We love tea. We love punting. We love C.S. Lewis. I have watched, I don't know if you know this, but there are many, many, many crime shows based in Oxford.
That's true.
And I've watched them all. all of them.
And she's still watching all of them.
And I still cry at seeing the Dreaming Spires. So it's hard not to say England, but I love Denmark. Denmark is surrounded by beaches. These just beaches everywhere you go. The Danish people are just so lovely. They're kind and pleasant. They are not like the Germans. I apologize to any Germans listening.
We love the Germans.
And my husband sitting next to me.
Ich liebe die Deutschen. Immer noch.
But the Danish are just, they're so lovely. They defy this staunch stereotype of the Norse people being so, you know, hard and cold. And so do the Swedish, but not the Norwegians. Anyway, the food in Denmark is delicious. They eat a wonderful mix of delicious cheese, barbecue, pastries, and the most amazing coffee ever. It's like the perfect place on the planet.
Sure is.
That's what I think. And there's sailboats everywhere. I love the sailboats. I don't know if I already said that. But we spent some time living in, about 3 months, so not a long, long time, Christiania, which is a hippie commune, still living and thriving and existing today since the 60s, which is right in the heart of Copenhagen. And it's very weird, but it's also a delight. It's colorful and creative. There's weird vegan food everywhere. Did you want to say anything about Christiania?
Of course, yeah. Christiania is something that's super special. I think it's top 2 in the sites of Copenhagen that you have to see after the Mermaid.
Right.
It's like one of the places you have to go to, and it's set in a place called Christianshavn. That's how they say it. It's Christian's Haven, basically. Has these beautiful houses. Port. Yeah, it's this beautiful scene. You're by a bridge with a little river, and then what happens is there's these houses with all kinds of different colors, and it's just bright right in your face. And then you go get into Christiania, and suddenly you're in this different world. You walk into the commune, and suddenly the buildings look different. You have street art everywhere by the people that live there that looks different from everything else outside. You have little shops and vendors with crafts, and suddenly there's a street where drug sales is happening all day long of the legal and not so hard drugs, but it's tolerated, but it's not legal.
No, there's police raids all the time.
That's right.
And it can be a little dangerous,
It can be dangerous, and if you're there as a tourist and that happens on the day when you're there, that's unfortunate.
SWAT, you just duck down.
Man, it's like the SWAT coming in and raiding the whole place. And guess what happens? After all that is over, you have old drug lords leave and new drug lords come in. And there's like good people there, and there's crazy people there, and you have homeless people there, and you have creative people there that just have found their home there and are really artistic and really productive with their giftings. And there's a little tiny church in there too, right at the back of the street where they sell the drugs. You have a concert hall there. Bob Dylan played there before too. So it's really this really interesting, popular place that's one of a kind. And I think we have something similar in Berlin, but you could almost liken it to it, but it's not quite the same with the Raw Temple area that is very artsy, but it's not a commune. It's just like this one place that anyone can just go into.
Yeah.
Right.
The thing I always thought was interesting about Christiania was that, it was supposed to be this kind of free place, where the hippies came and settled. But they had rules, man. I don't know if you remember, Thilo. They are super rigid on some of their rules and expectations.
No photos.
For example, just one of many. And if you're an outsider, you're an outsider. It's not easy to get to be an insider in Christiania. They are protecting their commune. And I just thought that was really fascinating because the rigidity of the place next to the creativity was such a juxtaposition. And I don't know, just kind of funny in light of the fact that they were so anti-establishmentarian.
It's true.
And they were such an establishment.
Yes.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about the Danish is that they bathe in the sea, in the North Sea, all year round. So all over the place along the water, there are these little docks, simple docks, not docks that you would actually tie a boat up to, but docks just for people to walk on that go way out into the sea, and they have a little ladder at the end. And the Danish people take a dip every day. They will walk out, obviously not every single Danish person, but a lot of the Danish people, they'll walk out, get in the water, often naked, and they do it year round. And they say that they don't feel the water getting colder, and they say that it's super healthy. And I'm sure it is. And also the Danish have a really low cancer rate. So I think that's such a cool part of their culture that they dip in the North Sea. If it's snowing, if the sun is shining.
Put 2 and 2 together.
It's the swimming that...
Let's try it.
Yeah.
Klamath Lake in winter?
Yes, the algae will save us. And okay, so I've got another travel quote for you. If you listened last week, you might remember that I talked about how much I long to get back the magic of my childhood and the glory of a child's rich imagination and discovery. So I found this quote by Bill Bryson, and I'll read it to you. I thought maybe that's why I like to travel. So Bill Bryson said, "That's the glory of foreign travel, as far as I'm concerned. I can't think of anything that excites a greater sense of childlike wonder than to be in a country where you are ignorant of almost everything. Suddenly you are 5 years old again. You can't read anything. You have only the most rudimentary sense of how things work. You can't even reliably cross a street without endangering your life. Your whole existence becomes a series of interesting guesses. That's Bill Bryson in Neither Here Nor There, Travels in Europe. And
beautiful.
I thought, that's it. I want to be a kid again. That's why I can't stop traveling. I want that sense of the unknown and of new discoveries and of grasping forward to learn things. But, you know, I also have to say, on a humorous note, that quote rang true for me because of the part about how it's hard to cross the street. Because I did probably the majority of my travels with my wonderful mother, and she has fallen over twice. Once she fell over in London.
Don't remind me. Yeah.
I shouldn't remind her.
Poor thing.
Sorry, Mom. Once she fell over in London, in the middle of Oxford Street. Anybody who's seen Oxford Street will know this is like a 6-lane, busy street. It's the shopping district of London.
It's the Times Square of London, maybe?
It is the Times Square of London.
It is.
If you're at Piccadilly Circus, yes. Anyway, so she falls over in Oxford Street. There's a big red double-decker bus bearing down on her. I was sure she was a goner. The bus did stop, and she got up and all was well. And then we went to Budapest in Hungary. And for whatever reason, and this is something we laugh about now, she was hurrying to get across the street, trying to beat me, because she had been internally feeling frustrated that I was always walking faster than she was, which I don't remember. So she goes zipping out into the street without really looking. A car hits her hand. She's knocked over, spun into a circle, falls down.
She's lucky it's only her hand.
The Hungarian driver was alarmed and startled. So yes, sometimes, even in a modern Western country, when you're traveling, even crossing the street can be an issue. And I can't laugh about this at all because I fell down in downtown Klamath Falls a few weeks ago and my big toe is still hurting.
Sorry about that, honey.
It's okay. Okay, so we kind of covered Europe a little bit, our favorite things about Europe. But we didn't cover what was awful about Europe. So for me, it was Spain. Not that I didn't like Spain. There's a lot to like about Spain. But it felt like the whole time we were there was a never-ending frustration. Did you feel that way?
It can be frustrating, yes. But, man, you know, Spain is a very diverse country. I liked Spain too, but we did have some incidences where we had to stop. Not that we were broken down with our RV. Our RV served us really, really well. But, and for Spain, we did go from all the way from the top, all the way down south to almost the southern tip of Gibraltar, which is the place where you can see Africa from. And it's like a ferry ride of how long? What, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour?
I really don't know how long the ferry
However,
ride is.
there's a ferry ride that goes straight to Africa, and it looks like you could almost swim there. That's how close it feels.
I wanted to do it and spend some of the winter in northern Africa, but we learned that fuel can be a problem.
Oh, yes.
So we decided not to do it.
People just fuel up in extra buckets of gasoline and then go on these trips.
In Christiania, we met a lot of transient people who would spend their winter in northern Africa, and while they were in Europe, they would collect things like toasters and sometimes even old cars, and they would take them down and sell them in Africa.
That's so interesting.
And they would do that crossing in Spain. So I thought, if they can do it, why can't we?
Right.
Well, that's a dream for the future.
Right. Let's do it again.
Anyway.
Sam?
Okay, but in Spain, one thing is, everywhere we traveled, just about everywhere we traveled, you can park your RV at rest stops. No problem. It's free. It's not free in England. It's free just about everywhere else. It's no problem. You can find places to just park and sleep. But in Barcelona, and I guess because it's warm and every traveling person in Europe wants to go down there for the winter, you cannot park your RV anywhere. You cannot park it anywhere. And I mean, trying to find places to sleep and rough camp without paying a fortune, it was so hard. We would just be driving and driving and driving. And I super duper wanted to see the Gaudi Cathedral. And we did. When we whizzed past it on the street, that was
sure
it.
Did.
We couldn't find any propane in Spain.
So what's the
propane in Spain?
Right. Okay. No puns intended.
And people there don't speak English. Everywhere else, you can sort of get by. You can fudge through with with English, but not in Spain. So we would ask them where propane was. They'd give us it would seem like they were giving us a really confident answer. Go here, go there, go. And we'd go and we'd just be nowhere. We got lost a few times doing that. And also, the other weird thing was, in Spain, in the wintertime, there are these crazy poisonous caterpillars on the ground. I looked it up, and they are called pine processionary caterpillars. And they walk along in these long lines, head to tail. How long would you say those lines were? Like 6 feet long.
Sure, easy.
And they're super poisonous for dogs.
Yes.
They can be poisonous for people, too. People just don't usually get down and sniff them. And you would walk around and you would see these men with blowtorches burning them up because they're so bad for your pets and whatever.
Super manly.
Yes.
And everyone should have a blowtorch for that reason.
Right, to get the pine caterpillars. So Spain was a bit of a challenge. But I have to say, nevertheless, if you ever get a chance to go see the Plaza de España in Sevilla, it was one of the most dreamy, beautiful places that I have ever seen. It's almost even hard to describe it. And I think partly the reason that it is so seared upon my memory is because it was an unexpected surprise. Sevilla itself is gorgeous. It's very touristy. They do the bull run there. It almost has a Disneyland-like feel. Okay, but I'm not going to hold that against it because that's what it literally looks like. It wasn't designed that way. But anyway, there was this park there full of orange trees, more like a garden than a park. And we were kind of wandering around at random. And I remember, Thilo, that you had your guitar. And we sat on benches under the orange trees and we sang while you played your guitar. And then we suddenly came through the trees onto Plaza de España. And it's this gorgeous, symmetrical building covered in colorful tiles with these square ponds, 2 square ponds with little boats in them. It looks like something from a kid's story. I'll never forget it.
It was beautiful.
It was so beautiful. It was amazing. And yeah, like Thilo said, we traveled all over Spain. I was so surprised when I looked at the map, kind of trying to recall it all, that we went from Barcelona to Madrid to Sevilla to Valencia to Malaga to Marbella on the coast. And that is a big country. And Portugal. I was kind of surprised that we did all that driving around that country like that. And then when we left Spain, we drove through a little country called Andorra, which is the size of a city. It's like driving through Klamath Falls. Smaller maybe even.
If not even smaller, yeah.
And when we went from the sunny beaches, winter beaches in Spain, to a crazy snowstorm in Andorra. And we were trying to drive through the mountains of Andorra into the mountains of France. And we got stranded in the parking lot of a chain bakery in Andorra. And we were using their bathroom for like 72 hours. And they knew what we were doing. And they were looking at us, but they didn't say anything.
Sure.
And maybe partly because we didn't speak French. And they spoke very little English. But they were also very nice to us. And that was a crazy experience. And then we were also stopped by the secret police in Andorra. But I'll save that story for another time.
Sounds good, because that could get us into trouble. Maybe even here.
Okay, so that was my worst favorite thing, was just the struggle of finding places to sleep and finding propane in Spain. Did you have a least favorite part, Thilo?
Well, I just remember this one time, and maybe that's not so much in Spain. I don't even remember where it was.
It was actually in France.
In France. So we had this truck stop at night. We just stayed there like all the truckers would, and some other cars would just stay there for the night. We were actually in a pretty lit up place too. The lamps were right above us and everything was fine, seemed fine. And in the middle of the night, I hear this rustling on the front door, and it's shaking a little bit, but I don't think anything crazy. So I go back to sleep. Next morning, I get out of the door of the RV, find my wallet out in the opened up. Nothing's missing. Our door's open. And that's it. Someone broke into our RV in the middle of the night, didn't find anything what they wanted to find, probably the easy cash that I didn't have because I only had a card, right?
Thank goodness they didn't take your card.
And they didn't take any card. Yeah, or the whole wallet. And my goodness, being on the road, having to reapply for an ID or credit cards or anything, that is a headache. So I'm glad nothing happened along these lines. But yeah, so that was one of the scarier parts, right? But after that, we bought one of those straps that you use for moves, right? Like for furniture, to strap them down to any carts or in the back of the car. And we strapped the doors together on the inside, if that's the best way of explaining it, I guess.
Yeah.
And when you pull on one side of the door, you basically are stuck. You can't open it unless you loosen those straps. So that was our little security that we built into our RV after the fact, and that made me a little bit more nervous being on the road. But luckily, never ever anything else ever happened again.
No,
like that.
Yeah.
Yep. So
it's
it's
actually
just
pretty amazing.
one time experience that taught us, and here we go. Mm-hmm. And we didn't actually lose anything. So
I'm surprised that you told that as your least favorite experience.
It's just one of the more scary ones,
because we did almost die in a plane crash flying into Bucharest in Romania once.
Thanks for reminding me.
Really thought that would be your story. It's not an RV story. We were living in the RV at the time, but we opted not to drive to Romania.
Right.
We did drive to Romania at a later date, and that was scary, driving on those little roads in the dark.
And everyone's fast, and no one really looks at the signs and cares about the speed.
For miles and miles.
Yep.
Okay, but the plane crash, Thilo. I think that was life-changing for you, because when I met you, you love to travel and fly places, and now you'll do anything to avoid it.
I do anything to avoid flying. I still love traveling, and I love taking the car for many, many hours to get to the place that you could fly 1 hour to.
So we're not going to Hawaii. That's not on our list right now.
Let's see, however.
Okay, so Thilo, tell about the plane crash.
We took this cheap airplane, airline company called Wizz Air. I don't even know if they still exist in Europe. However,
they do.
We got a flight from Berlin to Bucharest in Romania, and everything was fine until we were about to land in Bucharest. And you have it, what happens is you get bad weather every once in a while. So that's what happened to us at night. It was pitch black outside. The only thing that you could see through the clouds here and there was the moon. And that was kind of like the orientation that I had. So captain tries to land, and the first time, the second time, the third time, and it just doesn't happen. We're not going down. We're just going up and down the whole time, left and right, up and down. It felt like we're on a roller coaster. I don't know if you remember that yourself.
Oh, I remember.
But it was scary, so much so that everyone around us started, screaming and not being calm anymore.
The weird thing for me was that, so all of the passengers started screaming. People were literally screaming.
They were.
And the pilot and the stewards were not saying anything.
No.
There was radio silence.
And maybe that's a policy to not make anything else worse.
You really thought they would come on and say, okay, people, we're having some turbulence.
Yeah.
They didn't say anything.
Yeah. Or we're having bad weather and we're trying again. Okay, this didn't work. And it didn't work again. So after the third or fourth attempt, and you can imagine on the right side, I see the moon out of the window, and the next moment I see it out of the left window. And that means we were going fast up and down and round and round. So it was quite something. And I was just praying to God, saying, this is it. Either this is it, or, just save us from this. Get us back to the ground.
I always imagined if I was ever in a situation like that, that I would try to tell the people around me about my faith.
Right.
But it was so loud. And so Thilo did try to tell people.
Yeah.
But the screaming and the sound of the storm was so loud. No one could hear you anyways.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
So as it was scary, I did feel like there was some sort of peace, and the prayer did help. However, we flew on all the way to...
well, the pilot did eventually come on the radio.
Oh, did he?
And he said...
I don't remember that. Yeah.
We're in a storm.
Thank you very much.
We're going to have to do an emergency landing.
That sounds great. And that was 200 miles away from Bucharest. So we went to a little offset airport or airfield, I want to say, of I think it was an American airfield near the Black Sea, and landed there, had to wait there a couple of hours, 3-4 hours in the middle of the night until buses would come and get us. You could see other cars coming up.
It was like, can I just say this?
Yeah.
It was more like we had to wait 10 hours for some buses to come pick us up, not in a normal airport, in an empty, basically very little used old U.S. airbase in Romania. And the crew, the pilots and the stewardesses, and et cetera, were picked up within a couple of hours by these luxury cars. And without a word to us of consultation or instruction, they all disappeared.
That's right.
And we were left on the floor of this little place, airport hall, for 10 hours.
And not knowing if actually buses would be coming
They
our
did
way.
say buses would come, and they did come.
Yeah.
But we were starting to despair. Anyway. But I kind of wanted you to talk about that, Thilo, because I learned after we moved to Klamath Falls about this man, David R. Kingsley, who is the man that the Air Force Base here in Klamath Falls is named after. Is it Air Force? I think it's actually National Guard, right?
It's the Air National Guard.
The Air National Guard,
It's Air Force National Guard.
So David Kingsley, maybe some of you know this, maybe you don't. David Kingsley is a World War II hero who gave his life for his brothers in arms. And this is why it kind of relates to our story. His plane came under heavy fire in Pliosi, Romania. I'm sure I'm saying the name of that town wrong. But he had flown from what I think is the very Air Force Base where we crash landed. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I actually can't find another U.S. base on the map, so I think that he flew out of the same base where we crash landed. He was originally from Portland, Oregon. He is almost exactly the same age as my grandpa, so he could have known him. Okay, who knows? It's a big, small world. Anyways, in any event, I thought I would read a little bit from the Wikipedia article about David Kingsley. And in the article about him, they have his Medal of Honor citation. So this is what it says. It says, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty, June 23rd, 1944, near Pliosi, Romania. While flying a bombardier of a B-17 type aircraft, Lieutenant Kingsley's aircraft was severely damaged by intense flak and forced to drop out of formation. The damaged aircraft, forced to lose altitude and to lag behind formation, was aggressively attacked, causing more damage to the aircraft and severely wounding the tail gunner. The radio operator notified Kingsley that the tail gunner had been wounded and that assistance was needed to check the bleeding. Kingsley made his way back to the radio room, skillfully applied first aid to the wound, and succeeded in checking the bleeding. The tail gunner's parachute harness and heavy clothes were removed, and he was covered with blankets to make him as comfortable as possible. Again, Kingsley's aircraft was aggressively attacked, and the ball turret gunner was wounded. Kingsley administered first aid. A few minutes later, when the pilot gave the order to prepare to bail out, Kingsley immediately began to assist the wounded gunners in putting on their parachute harness. In the confusion of the tail gunner's harness, believed to have been damaged, could not be located in the bundle of blankets and flying clothes which had been removed. With utter disregard for his own means of escape, Kingsley unhesitatingly removed his parachute harness and adjusted it to the wounded tail gunner. Due to the excessive damage caused by the accurate and concentrated fire of the enemy aircraft, the pilot gave the order to bail out, as it appeared that the aircraft would disintegrate at any moment. Kingsley aided the wounded men in bailing out and last was seen by the crew members standing on the Bombay catwalk. The aircraft continued to fly on automatic pilot, then crashed and burned. His body was later found in the wreckage. Second Lieutenant Kingsley, by his gallant, heroic action, was directly responsible for saving the life of that wounded gunner. I think that's such an amazing story.
That's incredible.
Greater love has no one than he who gives his life for a friend. So we nearly crashed. There were no bombs. There were no guns involved. The noise was incredible. So how much more incredible would it be under those circumstances? And I can remember how certain I was that we were going to die and how bewildered I was that I was going to die in a plane crash. And I don't think I would have had the clarity of mind to sacrifice my life to help others on the plane. But I wish I could say that I would have. I wasn't tested in it, so I don't know. But I do know that I had peace about it. I remember thinking, oh, I'm surprised this is how I'm going to die. And I'm glad that we're all going to die together.
Yes.
But I don't think
that.
But I was not afraid to die. I wasn't afraid of that. Anyway, I just thought that that was interesting that our airfield's namesake, I don't know, that we would move here of all places, that it has this place that's named for a man who gave his life in that way in Romania.
Romania.
Yeah, in the same Air Force base. So that's your local town hero. That's who your base is named after. That's super cool.
Yes.
Okay, so back to the topic of travel. Let's move on from Europe because we also traveled to China, where we stayed in Beijing. We traveled and visited an underground church. We visited Taipei a number of times. We honeymooned in Morocco. We stayed twice in the Arabic Quarter on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. We met a very gallant camel who lived in the garbage under an unfinished building in Egypt. So, Thilo, but you've actually traveled further and farther than I have. Talk a little bit about some of your travels outside of Europe.
So next to being a musician and, passionate about music, I'm just as passionate about media and videography and audio and whatnot. And so I went to, as a camera guy, hired camera to Africa 2 times, and I was able to go to Uganda and I was able to go to Nigeria. And one of my journeys took us all the way to an island called the Sigulu Island, and that is right on the lake or attached to the Lake Victoria. That's famous, right? And it took us 3 hours to take a little motor boat, so to say, canoe, all the way there. And I had a long sleeve jacket on and a baseball cap on. But guess what? I didn't put any sunblock on. So I learned my lesson really hard, and I looked like a fried chicken on the way back, and it hurt. However, so if you're ever on the water traveling that long during the daytime, put some sunblock on. Just do it. Spend the money and get it. However, on the way back, it was late at night. Rain would start coming. It was pitch black. We didn't know where we were going. And the guides who were in the boat and knew exactly what they were doing weren't scared at all. But we were making jokes the whole time too. Wow, we're going to die here. This is it. And then I think the other story that's really impressive is in Taiwan.
But you didn't die.
I didn't die, so I'm here to tell the story. And we were just very grateful and laughed about it after the fact that we're so scared when we finally saw those lights at the end.
Were you wet?
We were soaked in rain, yes. The boat had holes in it too, of course, so we were trying to just, get the water out of it. And I had all my camera equipment there and just had my jacket over it, so I did not, wasn't protected from the rain. However, one of our other journeys that we took as a family was in Taiwan. We went into one of the highest mountains there, and it's so high that you lose the quality of oxygen, and you cannot breathe as properly as you need the oxygen in your lungs. So what happens is you get dizzy and you feel like you're drunk or something's wrong with your mind and you're losing your mind. And our friend took us up there and not preparing us at all what this might be like.
I've got it. It's Mount...
Here we go.
I can't even say it.
Okay,
it's Mount Hehewanshan.
Oh, very good.
Elevation...
Gesundheit.
3,422 meters, 11,000 feet.
11,000 feet, exactly. Yes?
Mount Hood's elevation is 11,000 feet.
So if you're all the way on the top there, you're going to, lack the oxygen that you need to function normally. So your brain just cuts out and doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So you feel like you're in a dream or you have a fever or whatever. And people do get sick, right? That's what they get. They get the mountain sickness or whatever, or altitude sickness, right? Whatever you call it. And then not only that, but we had our tiny 10-month-old babies there, and they didn't know what happened to them, and we didn't know what would happen to us. So
we we didn't know.
Oh, they had a terrible time. That was horrible.
Our
for
friend
them.
Took us up there and didn't tell us.
He didn't prepare us at all. So, however, that was one of those things that were kind of favorite stories out of the travel outside of Europe for me.
You know what I always remember about that? The Taiwanese people are great with their tea, and I don't even know who these people were, but they joined us there. And they had this expensive tea, and they would take it out into the parking lot and just set up a little flame boiler and make their tea on it. And we would all sit and drink tea through the haze of our elevation sickness.
That's right.
But that was lovely.
It was.
And it really is the people who make it all worthwhile, right? The relationships and the people that you meet. And I feel like we've fallen short in our telling tonight because we haven't emphasized a lot of those people. But, obviously we couldn't do that in an hour. It would take forever to really give all that nuance.
One person at a time.
And we did have a wonderful translator when we were in China who was later tortured for his faith and ended up committing suicide.
Yeah, very tragic.
And I would love to do a show where we just honor him and talk about, his name was Jojo. Jojo. So we only have a few minutes left. Before we go, I want to mention some of the music that we've been playing in the background. My Aunt Mindy said the music is distracting. I'm sorry for that. It probably is. We'll have to keep trying to work on it.
Shout out to the people in Lakeview, by the way.
Yes,
with that.
Shout out to Lakeview. Anyway, so we're playing an artist named Lang Lang, who is a Chinese pianist who lives in southern Germany. Kind of goes with the topic of travel. He is just a pianist. He's not a composer. We stumbled on a song called Ylang Ylang by an artist called FKJ, featuring an artist called something 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 with an O, formerly known as June Maurizi. We had John Barry in there, who is mostly music movie composer, but the Out of Africa soundtrack is awesome. We've got some music by some old friends. A guitarist that we know who lives in Taiwan named James Carriage, and a young man in Berlin named Jonathan Morgenstern from his debut album Agua Azul. He has a soundtrack on there called Have No Fear, which he actually composed for my brother Gabe after he passed away. So it's lovely. It's got a lot of South American influence, so if you like that, check that out. Agua Azul by Jonathan Morgenstern. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with two quotes. The first one is from Mark Twain. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's life. That's from The Innocents, Abroad and Roughing It by Mark Twain. Then I found a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson that says, "Though we travel the world over to find the beauty, we must carry it with us or we find it not." And I have to say, I actually sort of disagree with Mark Twain's quote. I've known people, I actually had a friend who traveled to a country I won't name and became even more prejudiced of the people. She hated them after she left. Because when you travel, although you meet lots of really amazing people, you also find out that people are as bad as people. Any country you go to, they're prejudiced, and there's other people that they dislike. They have quirks that you aren't going to like, weird cultural things that you aren't going to like, and I just don't know if I can agree with Mark Twain that travel is fatal to bigotry or prejudice or narrow-mindedness. You might actually grow more narrow-minded and want to be set in your own ways. But my question to leave you with tonight is, if we want to go with what Ralph Waldo Emerson says and want to find the beauty in the world and we must carry it within ourselves, how do we do that? How do we overcome the natural flaws that people around the world have, that we know we ourselves have, in order to achieve that ultimate goal of finding the beauty that's everywhere? That's the question I'm going to leave you with tonight. Thank you for listening. This is K-Tech 89.5 FM in Klamath Falls. So you don't have to actually have traveled to have your horizons expanded and to know how beautiful the world is. Let's be clear about that. Whether you have physically traveled or traveled in your mind, or you will or you won't, no matter what, may your heart and your mind be fertile ground. Until next Monday night, thanks for listening.